Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and welcome to our System Reset series. We're talking with the leaders who are taking us back into the world as we know it. And it's going to be small business people and the advisors to small business people. It's probably not going to be the government. I know that's a shock to everyone. It's probably not going to be the news media. It's going to be the people who actually work for a living and actually provide useful services to our society. And we're going to be talking with somebody who is a specialist and a leader to the industry, the profession of dentistry. As some of you may know or you may not know, dentistry was declared a non-essential service. And so through this entire period, people have not been able to go to their dentists. And, you know, what do the dentists do? What do they do with their staff? How do they pay their rent? How do they get back into the game? So we're talking with a guy that knows the answers to these questions better than anybody. Jerry Jones. Welcome, Jerry.
Ken, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad to be a part of this.
We're really happy to have you on. I'm a subscriber to Jerry's newsletter. You may think, well, Ken, you're not a dentist. You know, you don't own a chain of dentistry practices. Why on earth would you subscribe to Jerry Jones? Because Jerry Jones has a lot of intelligent things to say that are universally applicable to all businesses. And I'm going to ask him when he gives his introduction to tell people how they can subscribe to his email newsletter, because I think it's really worthwhile. So Jerry, could you give a little background on yourself and what you do and who you work with and how you work with them?
Sure, be happy to, Ken. And I think your intro that small business is the answer. I mean, we've always been the answer. Small business has for any economic recovery. Anytime there's a general economic need in this country, small business has risen to the challenge, and I have no doubt it will happen again. I've been in the dental world for 25 years. I've owned dental practices, even though I'm not a dentist. I owned a couple for 15 years. I got out of that aspect of the business about I guess it's almost been 3 years ago now. But I have continuously for 25 years provided some coaching, but a lot of marketing services to dental practices, online, offline, both. And I'm kind of a traditional marketer. You know, I'm not super hip on online stuff, but nonetheless, you know, we leverage those technologies. But so I work predominantly with solo practice dentists. So these are guys that might have one, they may have 2 or 3 locations, and these are guys that are in the trenches working every day. They've got to make payroll for a small business, you know, anywhere from $15,000 a month in payroll to, you know, on up. Sky's the limit. I've got one guy that's probably got close to probably a $200,000 a month payroll. Now he has a lot of locations, but you know, it's a good sized payroll to be making every month. So, it's a wide swath, and having owned an office and not being a dental practice and not being a dentist, I've got a unique perspective because I don't get mired down in the clinical side. I'm just on the business side, and that's kind of unique in the industry. There's a lot of retired dentists that, you know, coach on the business side, which is fantastic. They really understand, you know, the challenges. So that's been a business that I've owned for a long time, and I also have another business that I just recently purchased. It's a commercial property management business. So right now, obviously, that's a hot topic for a lot of people, right? So abatements, deferrals, and on. And so it's, you know, it gives me a different perspective of looking at this industry, you know, at the industry, but also business as a whole. So, Ken, it's been a crazy, really wild 2.5, 3 months. And, we've been going just 90 miles an hour every day, you know, 6, 7 days a week in some cases. So a lot of work is being done, not a lot of cash flow flying around, you know, because people are trying to figure things out. And so they're putting a lot of time in, just trying to figure out, what do I do? When do I do it? How do I do it? Is the government going to shut me down? I mean, you know, we just saw this case of this really brave hairdresser in Texas who's got a family to feed. And, you know, she refuses to grovel to the judge, and he sentenced her to seven days in jail. Fortunately, the AG of Texas steps in, the governor steps in and said, no, you're out of jail. Here's your get out of jail free card, which is,
thank goodness. I only knew the first half of that story, because that is a harsh punishment for nothing.
Well, for refusing to grovel. Now, This is the challenge, Ken, is what do you do? So if you're a professional, and this is a lot of the challenge that dentists have, is they're regulated by a state board. The state board determines how you run your business. So imagine being in a business. I had a guy, you and I both know really well, Dan Kennedy, said early on in my 25 years ago when I met him, any business that requires a license is a bad business because you have somebody else who can dictate the terms of your success. And so you can't, as a dentist, just say, screw you, government, I'm going to open up, or screw you, governor, I'm going to open up my business. You can't do that because they literally can take your license away. Now, that's the same challenge, by the way, that physicians also have. If you're a physician and you're a dissenter of Fauci, as I called him in an email, Air Fauci, if you're a dissenter and you don't necessarily agree with him, or you think only parts of what he's saying are accurate, you can literally lose your medical license.
Jerry, it's even worse if you just want to ask questions.
Yeah, like you're right, Ken. You can't even ask questions.
You can't even ask questions. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to make that clear. It's not that people have these hard, fixed opinions about what is and what isn't. They just want to have a deep discussion because this is a deep issue.
Yeah, we're talking life and death on both sides, because there's economic life and death. There are consequences, it's famous, there are consequences, right? Words have consequences. You're damn right they do, but actions of shutting an economy down have consequences that are unintended and far-reaching. And we won't know what a lot of those are, Ken, for probably several more months, and in fact, maybe even a year or two. So, I hope this never happens again. I hope that those measures that we've taken were maybe too drastic, but maybe not. I don't know. I think they were too drastic. In hindsight, it's maybe a little more clear, but I don't think that's the debate. I think is what do we do to get going again? So that's really where we want to go.
Exactly. I think and not to belabor this too much, but I think part of the problem is the people calling the shots, which starts with the public health bureaucrats, different from public health clinicians, by the way, who are actually treating patients. And then we have the media, and then we have local government or government people on all levels. None of these people make a payroll. None of these people provide a service where if they don't succeed in providing the service economically, they're out of business. They're all still getting their paychecks. I mean, no media person has lost their job. No local politician has lost their job. No government public health official has lost their job. They don't have to worry about putting food on their table or making sure that their employees are eating. So they're living in this sort of isolated unreality, disconnected from the rest of us. Hey, before we talk about the dentistry stuff, which I really want to get to because it's just such a clear-cut industry that has a very definitive problem that a lot of service-type businesses are going to face similar types of problems. But let's talk a little bit, and we hadn't prepared for this, but because I didn't realize, commercial real estate, when you're in commercial real estate, you're dealing with basically all the businesses of the world, all the different kinds of businesses. Tell me what it's like to be in that commercial real estate arena. I mean, I'm sorry, are you renting, is that commercial selling, renting to business clients or commercial in the sense of multi-unit?
Now we are 99% commercial tenants. So these are commercial buildings. They range in, warehouse. So we have some experience in the warehouse side, Class A, Class B office buildings, and then some, the industrial, I guess, warehouse, industrial, and then ground leases. We literally have a cross section, everything from hotels to hospitals to Class A buildings with national tenants. So, I mean, you name the type of tenant, we've got it. The small business guy sells motorcycle parts on the internet, and right next door to him, sharing a building, is an auto body guy. So, I mean, I literally am seeing a cross section. Now, interesting is in the month of April, we collected 97% of our rents, which is unbelievable. We had 6 deferrals out of a lot. I'm not going to get into the numbers, but we only had 6 deferrals. And which to me was amazing that we only had 6. Now, I think a lot of these, and so, again, we're talking dermatologists. That was a business that requested a deferral. We had an eye clinic, a very major eye clinic request deferrals and get them. but no abatements. We did 0 abatements, which are, indicates free rent. In other words, if a landlord abates your rent, they're giving you free rent. So these are all deferrals. So we'll collect the money. It's just going to be down the road a little bit. So imagine your business is the hotel business, and the hotel you own, but the ground that the hotel sits on is a ground lease, and that ground lease is very specific and prohibits abatement of any kind. Just flat out prohibits it. So in other words, if the tenant doesn't pay the ground lease, the hotel that sits on that ground becomes the owner of the ground. They become the owner of that hotel. So that was a sensitive one to negotiate, because we've got a guy here, long term, tenant, if you will, 20 plus years, and he's negotiating to keep his hotel because he can't afford to pay his ground lease, because his hotel relies 100% on people visiting patients in a VA hospital.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, see, all these unintended consequences. I mean, that's one I never thought of. What if your hotel, like you said, depends on a very specific clientele that another business that generates that business is gone? I just have to jump in. I was talking to my local printer, and I was just wondering how he was doing, and he said, "Well, look, my business was restaurants, churches, the local college, and fraternity organizations like the Elks Club and their benefits and their all the special events they put on to raise money for good causes." He says that business is 100% gone. And if I had I'm a somewhat thoughtful, insightful person, I like to think, and it never occurred to me that a guy like that would be hit so hard. And he doesn't appear in any statistics. He's not unemployed. He's not out of business. He's not asking for a deferment.
Right? No.
Yeah. He's one guy running the shop, and he's been serving us for 20 years, and he's the closest. He's the only guy in town. He's a good guy, luckily for us. The next printer is 30 minutes away by car. So from a humanitarian point of view, I want him to survive, because why shouldn't he? He's a good man. He provides good service. But also the other thing people don't seem to realize is all these wonderful little services that we take for granted, the cafes, the restaurants, the printers, you name it, they could disappear. They could not open their doors again. And we're going to be a much poorer society. Forget the economics, I won't be able to go to anyway, I could rant and rave about this all night. But
I'm with you. I understand where you're coming from 100%. Yeah.
I'm just astonished that you turn the TV on, it's like there's no discussion of this. It's like we, and by we I mean the people of the world who provide services to other people in the world, it's like we don't exist. The government exists, the media exists, the bureaucrats exist, the policymakers exist, but everybody else is just sort of this gray blob, who will just, they'll muddle through somehow.
Well, here's another, Ken. This is a big one now, and I think most people, unless they've really been paying close attention, they won't understand this one. So one of our tenants is a major healthcare organization. In fact, it's a local hospital, and they have multiple clinics. Those clinics were all staffed up for COVID. All of the services that the hospital would routinely provide, things like, well, let's say your gallbladder bursts. Let's say, you just have a routine surgery, a knee surgery, whatever, a shoulder surgery, or you have, something that maybe you have cancer and you're just putting off treatment a little while, and you've got a little time and you're going to put that treatment off. So the other unintended consequence of this is hospital shifts all of its energy, resources, time, everything to COVID. And there's no money to be made in COVID. So now you've got these major hospital organizations bleeding cash because they have nothing coming in for elective surgeries, which provides the bulk of their revenue and certainly the bulk of their profit. So who would have thought a hospital who, everybody thought, oh man, great time to be in medical care. Bullshit. It isn't. It's a bad time.
Yeah.
I was talking to my physician this morning. I had a physical this morning, and he said, hey, wait till you see what happens, because now we've got this backlog we've got to somehow shove through the hospital systems, as they start to take on more and more patients again for elective stuff. But he goes, what's going to happen when in October, November, December, when all these seasonal problems ramp back up again? what's going to happen? So we've shot ourselves in the foot by shutting everything down and going 100% focus on a virus that nobody really, I don't know if anybody really truly understands it yet. I mean, that's the challenge. So we shut everything down, and now starting it back up again is going to be really, really tough.
Great. So let's talk about the specific challenges of dentists. And so everybody knows what a dentist is, but if you get on the other side of the counter and imagine that you're a dentist, so what is a dentist, besides being good at what they do, helping people with their dental and oral health, what does a dentist have to juggle in good times, and then what are they dealing with now, and how do they overcome what's just happened, and what are they actually overcoming? So let's start with maybe just a quick sketch of the life of dentist as businessman.
Sure. Yeah, you bet. So this will sound probably very familiar to a lot of people that own small businesses. So, a dental practice has a fixed overhead. They've got a lease payment. They've got, the typical expenses a small business will have. But I'll give you an example. So my dental office was by no means a huge operation. It was a slightly above average dental office. And what I mean by that is in terms of revenue, we were slightly above average. So let's say we pull in $1 million a year, we're going to have an overhead of about 800, plus thousand. And that, by the way, may or may not include doctor pay. So if I'm a solo practitioner dentist and I'm doing $1 million a year, I'm probably netting $250. Right? Now that's before taxes. So I'm probably netting $250 out of that $1 million. So I'm running a 75% overhead if I'm the provider. If I'm not the provider, I'm probably pushing 90, 92, 93% overhead. So there's about a 7% margin for a corporate office, right? So there's all these corporate offices running around, maybe 7% net. So, I mean, that's just the hard reality of the numbers. So these guys aren't operating on huge margins. But what happens is when the government comes in and shuts you down, a lot of your fixed overhead doesn't change. It just keeps on going. Most dentists I know are in debt. That's a sad fact. Most of them are in debt, just like all Americans. They're making credit card payments. They've got a house they can't afford. They're driving new cars. They've got kids in private school or university. So they're all maxed out. So they don't have a lot of room. Not many of them can survive for 6 months without revenue coming in from their dental practice. So you shut them down for 2 or 3 months, so they've got 2 or 3 months of fixed overhead now that they've got to recoup just to break even on those months they were out. That could take them over a year to generate that revenue to break even. So by my rough guesstimates, most of these dental practices, it's going to take them 18 months to get back to where they were prior to shutdown. That's just to get even.
Okay.
That's not to make money.
And folks, for everybody listening to this, Jerry's operated, as he pointed out at the beginning of the call, he's operated dental practices, so he really knows these numbers. So 18 months just to get back to zero.
Yeah, and so that's one type of small business. Now doing that is another challenge. So it isn't like a typical, maybe this is an atypical business. So people already hate going to the dentist. They already fear the dentist. They know it's going to be expensive, quote unquote. Frankly, that it's not if you're going on a regular basis. It's very reasonable, like any healthcare, if you stay on top of things. But people don't want to go already. So now you layer on a virus, and now you layer on all the fear that has been dispersed and just heavily beat into Americans for the last 3 months. You are going to die. Look around. Out of 10 people, one of you is going to die. If you go out and leave your home, you're going to kill your grandparents. I mean, this is the kind of crap that's been fed into us for the last 3 months. So having a business that now you've got to counter the fear, and you have to re-educate. You have to inform, and you have to do a lot of things just to get your phone to ring, let alone to get someone to show up in the office and sit in the chair and undergo dental care. So there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done, a ton of it.
So what are you advising your guys? How do you advise they get? Now, assuming that's a state by state issue, isn't it? Whether a dental practice can open or not. Yeah. What states? Just out of curiosity, what states are behaving sanely, if any? I can tell you right now, New York State is not where I live. If it weren't such a leadership. If it weren't such a beautiful place and I didn't have so many friends here, I would be so long gone. But anyway, we'll leave the New York State out of it. But what states are showing good leadership?
So I think Wisconsin is showing good leadership. As a matter of fact, I got a text message yesterday from a dentist, one of my clients there. He sent me a picture of his production, what he has scheduled for the coming week. And he said, hey, I'm getting back to normal. In other words, there's money coming in. So I think Wisconsin, based on his activity for the last 2 months, he's been seeing emergency patients as aggressively as he dared without upsetting the authorities. In other words, they were allowed to see emergencies, but that's pretty much it. So he was aggressively seeking emergency patients. That was his method of staying afloat. I think Oregon, they have opened up Oregon. There are just a lot of new, in all states, there are a lot of new processes and procedures to follow because apparently we're all going to die from the virus. So there's a lot more that's being done from a personal protection standpoint. So, it's like you walk into the grocery stores now and they've got the shield up in front of the person taking your money at checkout. It's that kind of stuff. It's, these overreactive, steps. So dentists they have to juggle that. So I'm telling, so Oregon, I think Washington is not yet there. But Georgia, for example, I've got a couple clients down there that have been able to open up this week and get going again. But I haven't really heard from a lot of states. I think many of them are pushing it out further into May before they're going to allow, their folks to get back into some operative.
Hey, Jerry, the guy who was aggressively going for emergency patients, I assume he was doing that through advertising?
You bet he was. There were a couple of my clients, one in Pennsylvania in particular and one in Wisconsin, who decided that, okay, if you change the rules, I'm going to change my approach, right? That's entrepreneurial thinking. So the rules changed, the goalpost gets moved, so what are we going to do to find the goalpost again? So they said, well, if you're going to limit me to emergencies, that's okay. We can scrape by on that. So we will just start promoting emergency dental care online. And so they just went full digital and also to their patient base, sending communication by U.S. mail and electronically to their patient base saying, hey, don't delay your emergencies. We are closed for new patients to take on new patients, but if you have a dental emergency, make sure you don't put it off, right? So that was really their process, was just informing their existing patient base and then advertising online, Google ads, Facebook ads.
Did they take any special pains to allay people's fears about coming in? Do you know if that was in advertising as well?
It was.
Or they it was.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, we created several different formats that our clients could use to do just that. In other words, here are the facts as we know them today. This is really what you should be concerned about. And it looked a lot like a letter I received from my physician, the guy I was just talking about a few moments ago, which was, don't panic, don't overreact. If anything, limit your exposure to the news media because you need to just rely on facts. I'm not real, country doctor, right? He's a rebel.
That's the real virus, though, is the news media and the hysteria.
Yeah.
So in addition to saying, hey guys, he did the smart thing, which is he had a good relationship with his customers. He had his clients, his patients. He had their email and mailing addresses, and then he communicated with them and said, hey, if you got an emergency, come in. Don't worry, or don't be afraid. And then I guess he also conveyed that it's safe to come in if you have an emergency. It's not a dangerous thing to do.
That's correct. Yep, that's correct. And that's just, picking the messaging that you want your patients to understand, and that is giving them some facts, right? Here in Oregon, we still have, and I just saw it on the freeway as I'm driving back, which if you're on the freeway today, you wouldn't realize that we're still in a quote-unquote state of emergency and shut down here in Oregon. The freeways are packed with people this morning. But on my way back, there's this big sign by the Oregon Department of Transportation that says, stay at home, save lives. And that was something that the doctor and I discussed this morning. He and I were laughing because there's a study that just came out just recently. It hit some parts of the media, obviously not all of it. It basically said the people that are catching this are the ones that have been staying home. so it's, it's kind of one of those things like, well, if that's the case, but I mean, any reasonable person understands that being outside of your home, whether that's, walking around outside in nature or, going to the store, getting in your car, and walking around the park, that's actually better than being inside. So,
well, I have to say, I just have to say this. People that followed this closely could have known this by what happened in Wuhan and what happened in northern Italy, because in Wuhan they locked everybody in their houses. Sometimes they steel welded the doors shut, and everybody got sick anyway because you're in a closed space. And I don't know how many people are aware. I bet people in the medical profession are aware, because sometimes they have to take special precautions, especially surgeons, that indoor air pollution is far worse than almost any outdoor air pollution you've ever experienced in your life. Like the normal levels of indoor pollutants, windows not open, fresh air not circulating, is worse than outdoor air pollution. So telling people to stay locked in their houses, if you want to make people sick, that's the golden key to get that accomplished.
Yeah.
So are you creating programs for your dentists?
We're providing them. Yeah, we're providing them some information they can share. So we're literally just pulling stuff off the CDC. Now that sounds counterintuitive to what we just said, right? But the CDC actually has some good information if you dig into it. There is some good information there and facts. And one of those facts is you're at a higher risk of getting in your car and dying this afternoon than you do of any other way of dying, period. And that includes any virus, right? Ebola, SARS, MERS. Your automobile is the number one biggest risk. So, if you really want to use common sense and you're trying to mitigate the potential of your death today, don't get in your car. And I had this argument with a doctor because he was giving me, grief about my comments to my subscribers. Oh, you have no idea. This is, you're not a doctor. This is heavy science. And so I just went to the CDC site and pulled off some facts and said, here's your heavy science. And then he wanted to argue about, well, I'm talking about a disease. You're talking about voluntary action. I'm like, a death is a death. Just ask the people who've lost someone. They'll tell you. It doesn't matter how they were. They're gone. That's all that matters. So, I don't think anybody voluntarily.
I don't think anybody voluntarily gets into a fatal car accident. It's interesting. There are within these bureaucracies. There are sane people who actually do put together sane information and make it available to the public, but you do have to dig for it, and it's usually not in the headlines. It's usually buried on the website. For instance, I think there's a huge gap between I know there's a huge gap between what the CDC's actual death counts are and what routinely comes out of the mouths of experts and newscasters. I'm always thinking, my God, is it really that bad? And I go back to the CDC, and it's sometimes half as many as somebody just said on TV that it was. So,
Yeah. If you don't mind, Ken, I want to talk a little bit about that. I know this is a market. We're going to talk about marketing.
I know.
We have a little bit, but there's another. So that same doctor's appointment this morning. So the timing for this appointment was fortuitous with this phone call. Doing this, we were talking about comorbidities, and he said, Jerry, it's interesting. He goes, this happens routinely. So let's say I get a call at 3 a.m. in the morning to go to the ER to deal with one of my patients. And let's say it's an elderly patient, and they've been there since 11 a.m. It's now 3 a.m. in the morning, but they've been there for a while. The ER doctor really hasn't had a chance to run every single test, and he's called me in because of a quote-unquote state of mental change, right? So there's been a state of mental change to the patient. That's why they're admitted to the ER. However, they haven't ran all the tests, and so Matt will say, hey, we need to run, have you done a chest x-ray and check for pneumonia? No, that's next. That's literally where we're taking her next. Okay, great. So they find out that this patient has pneumonia. Well, here's the problem. Medicare gives the hospital a 6-hour window to pay them for pneumonia diagnosis. If they miss the 6-hour window and the hospital still wants to get paid, guess what? They got to change the diagnosis. And the diagnosis is now changed to change in mental state, because that can get paid. That's a claim that'll get paid by Medicare because there's a 6-hour window. So you're seeing this a lot with doctors who are now choosing COVID-19 as cause of death versus one of the other half dozen comorbidities that the patient was admitted with, diabetes, former stroke patient, on and on and on. So I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just simply relaying what I learned today about that. So then it really makes you question the statistics. And there's been some of this already, in the news. If you're looking for it, you'll find these questions of how many people are really dying from COVID. Well, it's a fraction. It's a fraction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just some things for people to think about. Whether they agree with you and I or me or you, it's not the point. You have to really dig, because the news media, there's no sensation in the things you and I are talking about, Ken. There's just nothing. There's nothing sexy.
Getting back to work,
anything, and it's boring.
Right, getting back to work, taking care of our clients and patients, paying the salary, payroll. That's boring. Yeah, death and destruction are fantastic. And I think people also, we're, as marketers, as business people, we're always having to make business decisions. We're dealing with vendors. We're choosing to adopt new methods that may be very expensive. So we're always having to think and research and analyze. And we have to just understand that everybody has an agenda. Now, some people might have a good agenda. They actually, have something that is good, and they want to make sure that you understand it. There are other people in this world that have, mixed agendas or shady agendas, and they can be very persuasive. And sadly, sometimes they're much better organized and much better focused than the good guys. The good guy's worried about being a good dentist. He's worried about taking care of his staff. He's worried about this. He's worried about that. And then marketing is his second, third, fourth thought. You might have another guy who's just, I'm not saying a dentist, we'll say some other field. He doesn't really care what he provides. He's just 100% thinking about how he's going to get the money.
Right.
So in a sense, it makes it easier for that person. And I'm afraid we have elements of our society at very high levels who are entirely focused on get the money to the exclusion of all else, of morality, of actual rendering a service, of accuracy in science, because there is money to be made by scaring the wits out of the people, money to be made by the media, money to be made by pharmaceutical companies, money to be made by people that are pushing certain surgical agendas. This is a game that's being played all the time, and everybody's got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
So are you creating like a package, a turnkey sort of thing, so that because again, this is everyone says this is unprecedented in history, and actually for the first time ever, I agree with them. This really, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. I don't think during the Black Plague, I don't think during the Mongol invasion, I don't think there's ever been such a thorough shutdown of things. So this is unprecedented. There is no textbook. You can't ask Grandpa how he dealt with it. Hey, Grandpa, what did you do when they shut the world economy down for 3 months? It's like, I don't know.
Right.
They never did it. So you really are pioneers. So it makes sense that a dentist, not a dentist or any professional or anybody in any business is not going to have a pile of insight, knowledge, and experience to draw on right now. So you're taking it on yourself to do the thinking for your guys. And I imagine you're packaging that in some way that they can buy help, buy services, buy advice. Am I on the right track there? We, essentially what we did is we did a couple things. One is we knew money was going to be a challenge. When you're trying to keep your business afloat, the last thing you're thinking of is probably, I should send a newsletter out to my patients. Reality is that's what you should be thinking about doing, because you need to be thinking about the communication aspect. So we really focused in on, how can we reduce our costs, thereby pass those savings on to the docs who are suffering. They just don't have the ability to run up a $10,000 bill on their credit card right now. So what do we do? So we took a look at what we were delivering service-wise. We cut our costs. We asked those that we rely on to deliver some aspects of those services to cut their costs. We couldn't go to the post office, but we certainly went to our printing and mailing house. And so we, as a company, took a hit on revenue because we wanted to help. And so we reconfigured, and then we put some packages together that were lower priced, which we did have a number of folks take advantage of those revised services. We also
basically handled the communication aspect for them and said, look, we'll tailor the message to your patients and the message you want to get across, which is we're going to be here for you in an emergency. We're going to be here for you when things get back to normal. In the meantime, we want you to be sure and take good care of yourself, and here are some things you can be doing. And that's one part of it, because when you think of a business, you think, oh, customers. Well, this is a brand new situation. Like you said, a lot of people, I think, made a critical mistake of not marketing to their employees. And here's what I mean by that. You're a dentist, and it's already damn difficult to get really great help. It's difficult to find a great hygienist. It's really difficult to find a great dental assistant and have them stick. So there's a lot of competition for the best talent in the industry. And if you're in a town that has 12,000 people and there's 4 dentists and all 4 of them lay off all their people, well, it kind of mixes things up a little bit. And who's going to go where when everybody goes back to work? And so, one of the things we said is, hey, you need to be communicating and marketing to your employees to let them know what's going on. In other words, you have to kind of open the book up and say, hey, guys, here's where we're at. Here's the plan. And the minute we get the order, we're going to be ready to go back to work. And so let's start preparing to get back to work. Right? And so, in other words, retaining the employees is just as critical, if not more critical, than retaining a patient. So I saw a lot of... I made here, but it's one of those lessons that you have to learn. It's like retention of employees is already difficult. Times like this when, a giant mixing bowl, we're all thrown into a mixing bowl, and the blender gets turned on high speed, what's it going to look like when you come out? Well, if you communicated with your employees, kept them in the know, reassured them, provided leadership, which really that's all this is providing leadership, then you're going to probably come out a hell of a lot better than the guy who literally shut the lights off, walked away, and didn't even call any of his employees to let them know what was going on. Now, if you were an employee at one of those places, Ken, what would you do? Right? Where would your loyalty be? Well, if the guy ignored me, I'd be like, dude, kiss my rear end. I'm out.
Yeah, or you're being given the message, hey, buddy, it's every man for himself. Good luck. And if somebody gives if somebody gives me that message, I will hear it and I will take action. Wow, what a simple thing! What a simple thing! Because it's unreasonable to think that you can, And again, it's not the dentist's fault. It's not the business owner's fault. But my favorite saying on earth is, it may not be your fault, but it's going to be your responsibility. So it is the business owner's responsibility to keep, if he wants to keep his employees, to keep them advised weekly. Guys, how you doing? Here's where we're at. Here's the plan. And if I'm an employee and I'm hearing that, I have some sense of confidence that I should at least pay attention. Whereas if I've been cut off cold, and if the guy calls me 3 months later and says, "Hey, come on back," I'm like, "Really? I made other plans."
Yeah, exactly. I've been on unemployment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but by the way, I've heard already from places where restaurants are opening, where they're only allowed to seat 25% of the normal coverage, that they're also having problems getting employees back because the employees are like, "Gee, I'm getting an extra $600 a week on top of my unemployment benefits."
Right.
I imagine that could be an issue in every industry.
Yeah, and I think that goes to relationships and leadership and the kind of individuals that you have as part of your organization. So a quality organization with quality leadership, quality training, quality retention program in place, and a real clear and definitive communication protocol plan and execution is probably not going to be battling with that. Now, they may. For some of the lower wage workers, they may, because these people are making an economic choice. You really can't blame them. I don't like it. No. I don't like that people see that and go, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go on we called it rocking chair back when I was a kid. I'm going to just go on rocking chair and I'll make $600 more than I would have if I'm working." Well, 2 things. Number 1, it isn't going to last. And number 2, is that really the right thing to do? And I've done a lot of things, a lot of dumb things. I've done a lot of wrong things, but I've done a lot of right things that were not beneficial to me. In other words, I tried to take the high road. I'm not perfect, but this is one of those situations where I think, I don't know. I would like to think I would take the high road because I would like to go back to work at some point. And if I'm an employer and I've got a bunch of employees that went on rocking chair unemployment, versus coming back to work when they could, I would really be hesitant to ever let them darken my door again, because that doesn't signify to me that we're in this, the popular saying on media, we're all in this together, which is all BS too. But because we're not, they're not in it with us. The government is not. The government workers are not in it with us small business people, as you talked about. So, yeah, I mean, that's a whole, that's a whole nother issue there.
Yeah, but as you point out, if you've sorted out your responsibility as a leader and fulfilled your responsibilities, which includes, attracting high-quality people, having a high-quality working environment, treating your employees well, fairly, decently, honestly, and then keeping in touch with them during this prolonged emergency, you have a much better, you're improving your odds that there's going to be a good outcome. And I agree with you about this unemployment thing. I think if somebody decides they'd rather sit on the beach than come back to work, maybe as an employer, I need to find people that are interested in work.
Right.
as opposed to leisure. And I do sympathize with the guy that's thinking, well, gee, I'm making more money staying at home. Why would I work? It's kind of short-sighted, but we want to be around people that aren't short-sighted.
Right. But
it's a hard point. Imagine having to compete with government largesse. Unbelievable. Go ahead.
That's really what it boils down to, is that now the private company is now competing with government for an employee. And the employee doesn't win. They win economically for a short term, but that's it. That is the only advantage, right? So, another thing that that we were dealing with on the commercial side, on the commercial property side, is imagine, you've got, let's say you have 100 office buildings, right, or 100 suites in 10 different office buildings, and 99 are vacant, and the last one has 2 people in it. So what do you do to prepare those to get people to come back into them? And what message do you send so that you don't lose tenants so that they come back as a property owner? That's a whole nother strategy that we've had to create, literally out of thin air, because who would have thought, people wouldn't want to come back to work into an office building? Well, now we're into HVAC systems, UV light treatment of HVAC systems. I mean, all this crazy stuff, Ken. Daily, hourly, nightly sanitation. I mean, disinfecting. This is a totally different world. And so now I'm having conversations with property owners that are like, gosh, what do I do? I'm like, well, we have a 7-point plan. Here it is, but it's going to run you an extra $3,000 a month. But the alternative is nobody comes back to your office building. So which would you rather have? And, so people are going to be dumping stupid money into UV light treatment systems and changing out air filters from a MERV 8 to a MERV 13, which is just a denser filter, like a hospital-grade filter. So this is the kind of weird crap that's going on. But if you're in that position as a property owner, you've got to be thinking about tenant retention now from a different standpoint than ever before. So it really has introduced weird dynamics in places that never before should they have been, have they been considered. Yeah.
I mean, there is as a consumer of indoor spaces and not a fan of them. I've visited people in offices that really needed some HVAC improvement, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. If it improves the overall standards of the interior air for everybody, we might all end up being healthier and more productive. So that could be a side benefit. I love the idea. I have to say, as the guy not writing the check, I love the idea of UV treatment of HVAC. Wow, that's awesome. The
more I've learned about it, the more I'm a proponent of it. I'm like you. I think indoor air quality, if you're going to be stuck in an office for 8 hours, you should be breathing the best air possible. I mean, that literally is your lifeblood, right? I mean, literally, oxygen, number one thing, your blood needs to be healthy. So, I think those are good. So there will be some positive overall improvements, I think, that come out of this. But who would have thought? Right? Who would have thought that's going to become a real central issue? I think for the future. If I'm looking at an office space, one of the questions I'm going to ask is, tell me about your HVAC system, UV light treatment. What level of filters are you using? MERV 8, MERV 13. What do you got? That's a valid question, and I think it's going to become something that's rather important.
For the owners that do take on that responsibility and that expense, it becomes a sales point.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, oh, you're not thinking of renting a place without a UV filter, are you? Oh my God! Well, we've got one, of course. Do you realize what's in those air systems?
Exactly.
You know, this reminds me. I seem to be in places with disasters like, you know, New York, 9/11, New Orleans, the flood, San Francisco, the earthquake. I was in all those places, right? And I had forgotten that one of the side benefits of the earthquake in San Francisco, way back when, was that there were a lot of shady buildings that really did need some retrofitting. I mean, that had been delaying it or had been allowed to delay it and really shouldn't have delayed it. And luckily, there wasn't really that much damage from that earthquake, which I'm trying to think of even when that was. It was the 90s, was it? 90s? Early 90s.
I'm gapping out. I'm gapping on the date altogether.
Yeah, I'm thinking late
80s, early 90s. I think I was in high school still in the late 80s, so it could have been the late 80s.
Yeah, and I hadn't yet moved there. I was actually visiting somebody when it happened, so it had to be before 90. So it must have been late 80s. But anyway, there really, in truth, except for the bridge that fell down, which was,
the collapse.
Yeah, I mean that was a really massive infrastructure disaster, you know, for that area. But except for that, there really wasn't that much, you know, horrible damage, you know. However, it became clear that a lot of people that had skimped on their earthquake reinforcement stuff, you know, reinforcing their own buildings, that needed to be fixed. And you know what? That did get all upgraded. I'm thinking, too, of New Orleans. You know, some neighborhoods had as much as 15 feet of water, you know, depending on where they were relative to sea level. And they sat in that water. I don't think people realize some of those neighborhoods sat in water for a month. You know, talk about the damage. I mean, one of the problems that happened. One of the problems that happened in New Orleans was the water sat on the ground for so long that the pressure broke the sewage and water pipes below. You know, I mean, these are little things you never think of. But but it did compel the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to retrofit a lot of the levees, and the ones that collapsed, they were compelled to build correctly. So, I mean, it was a terrible cost for the lesson. But yeah, I guess, you know, some positive things can come out of it. And frankly, if a radical improvement of the indoor air quality in workspaces occurs because of this, well, you know, that's a silver lining, because a lot of people do get sick from indoor air quality. I just got to tell this funny story because I love to brag about this. I have in-laws, you know, and one fall they all came down with this mystery respiratory disease. You know, they went to their doctor and he didn't know what to do. He gave them steroids, he gave them antibiotics, he gave them all these different things. And I said, well, when's the last time you cleared, because they have forced air. I said, when's the last time you cleared your air system? And they were like, you're supposed to clean it?
Oh, no.
These are well-to-do, educated people, by the way. And so they hired a guy. The guy came out, and there was stuff like inches thick in their air system.
Oh, my gosh.
The guy cleaned it out. The respiratory diseases went away, you know, immediately. Anyway, silver linings. Anything else we can share about how you're thinking about how to help dentists get back in business that can be applied? We've covered a lot of things that can be applied to business in general. Anybody dealing with the public, anybody dealing with customers.
I think you can't over-communicate at this point in time. I think you need to be in front of your clients and in front of your prospective clients regularly and often. And you don't necessarily need to mention COVID-19. I think what you need to mention and talk about is the steps that your business takes to keep your clients, patients, customers, whatever, safe, happy, and I think that needs to be, and I think this is a really important point, it needs to be demonstrated in your marketing. So if you're an online marketer and you're doing a lot of video, and let's say you're 100% online marketer for your dental practice. You know, you're on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. And there are a few offices out there that are 100% online with their marketing. Then there has to be demonstration provided showing showcasing that it's safe to be in your practice. Now, that could very well be patients who are in there at that moment in time on a video talking, yeah, I feel great. The only difference is I'm just wearing a little bit more stuff, Otherwise, here, this is, in other words, you want to provide evidence that it's safe. And that's most easily done by showing it, right? By video. And with the power of the internet and the video that's so easy, that should be a no-brainer. So regularly posting videos of people in the practice, walking around, talking, interacting, showing, hey, here are some of the upgrades we've made to our already hospital-level sterilization and disinfection techniques, right? Because dental practices operate at that level. So then show them what you're doing. And I think that demonstration is absolutely key. And then putting it in print, if you're, a print marketer like I am, you've got to be communicating by mail, email, text message, and I think my daughter's orthodontist has done a great job of this. During the whole time, he was communicating regularly. I would get an email from him about every 2 weeks with an update, basically it was like, oh, we miss you so much. We can't wait to get back, and we can't wait to see you again. So it was this really heartfelt, emotional communication, and that was regular. And then he texted me one day, and he's like, hey, can you send over Linea's latest pictures? Here's what you do. Take this picture, and this picture, and then just text them to me. So he did a virtual consult. So that's one way when you're throwing a total curveball like we've been here. Those are a few ways I think you need to engage and develop or create to keep people in touch with your business, what's going on, and keep them updated. And Ken, the biggest lesson is, unless you give people a narrative, they'll make up their own, right? So unless you give them the story, they manufacture their own, and 99% of the time it is not going to be accurate. So if you want your story told, tell your story yourself so that it doesn't take on a life of its own.
Well, that's a really powerful one. And something you were saying about the sterilization techniques and the cleanliness and all that, dentists know that they always do that stuff. They're always careful. They're always taking great care. It's probably something they have never dreamed of telling their patients about, because why would you? So that may be a change of mindset, to open to pull back the curtain. It reminds me of the great Claude Hopkins campaign to sell Schlitz beer.
Schlitz beer, right? Remember? I was just going to say that.
Right? It's like,
yep.
Hey, we use finest water, we use steam sterilized glass or whatever. He went on and on, and the guy said, but every beer maker does that. And Hopkins said, doesn't matter. You'll be the first one to tell them. So very powerful. And then another thing that you said that's so important and is the human element of this is so huge. We're direct marketers, so we tend to focus on headlines and benefits and value and all that. But when you look at image marketers, one thing that they do a lot is show groups of people together having fun, enjoying the product. That's how beer is sold. That's how a lot of and why did they do that for all those many decades? Because we are really social animals, and we crave and greatly enjoy connection. So, hopefully everybody has been cultivating a human element in their business, and this is something to make sure, I think, that is made really clear. People in the practice, in the office, interacting with the staff, images of that. The idea that you miss your customers, that you're looking forward. I mean, I think everybody is longing to go back to normality. So I think if you can position yourself and what you offer as a slice of normality, and safety, of course, but normality too, and human connection, that's going to be very powerful. It's going to be very powerful. Hey, Jerry, I meant it when I said at the beginning of I meant it when I said at the beginning of the interview that I subscribe to your dental practice newsletter, not because I'm in the dental world, but because there's always so many useful ideas in it. Is it okay for other people who are not dentists to subscribe to your email? I mean, hopefully it won't crash your server.
No, it's totally fine. I do on occasion, I recognize I have some folks that are not in the dental world as subscribers, and so the neat thing about business is business is business is business. Consumers are consumers are consumers. And so what works for a dental practice usually can be tailored the vast majority of the time to work for any client or patient-based business. And in a lot of cases, businesses that don't have a routine, regular, recurring clientele, it still works. So I think there's value always to be gleaned from that. And I mean, I'm very direct. I share my experiences. I don't hypothecate a lot. It's just, I just try and I'm very direct. I mean, my style. I don't beat around the bush, and I'm sometimes politically incorrect and all that. But I'm totally fine with that. It's jerryjonesdirect.com, and it's it's a badass squeeze page, and it's patterned a lot after Ben Settle. And some people that are Ben Settle fans will go there and go, "Oh, looks like Jerry ripped off Ben's design." Well, I'd like to say we borrow greatness. So Ben, thank you for that. It's just a squeeze page. You can go there and enter your email, and you'll get my email newsletter when it comes out.
Great. That's Jerry with a J, jonesdirect.com. Well worth being a subscriber. If you have friends, customers, neighbors who are dentists, let them know about Jerry. They'll be very glad that you did. Jerry, thanks. You've been so encouraging to me. Reading your emails over the last several weeks has been a big morale booster for me, and I want to thank you for that. And thank you for making the time to share some of your insights with our crew.
My pleasure, Ken. You bet.
Okay, we'll see you around the internet.
All right, sounds great, Ken. Thanks.